You study the brain, the physical brain, the actual biology of the brain. What are the effects of cannabis on the brain, marijuana on the brain?
So I published a study on 1,000 marijuana users, compared it to our healthy group. Every area of their brain was lower in blood flow and activity. And then just this year,
Measurably
on the imaging study we do, which is called SPECT, S-P-E-C-T, single photon emission computed tomography. It looks at blood flow activity, but also looks at mitochondrial function.
What's mitochondrial function?
So the mitochondria are little energy powerhouses in your cell. They activate and keep the cell energized and alive. And 49% of the tracer that we do this study with is actually taken up by the mitochondria in the brain. So when we see low activity, it's really low activity along with decreased blood flow. And then there's a new study by a completely separate group than ours on 1,000 young marijuana users, and the areas of the brain involved in learning and memory were low in blood flow and activity. So it's not just me because I have a problem with marijuana. It's other scientists as well saying marijuana is not great for the brain.
What are the effects of less mitochondrial activity and lower blood flow?
So it can go with tiredness. It can go with low motivation. It can go with depression over time. It can go with more anxiety because your brain can't settle it down. And in vulnerable people, it can go with an increased risk of psychosis. Not for everybody,
right?
But for everybody, the risk is somewhere between 2 to 4 times, especially if you start young. And now it's the young that are suffering from the idea that marijuana is innocuous, because it's not innocuous. But because they think it's innocuous, I think psilocybin's going to go the same way. When the perception of the dangerousness of a drug goes down, its use goes up. And teenagers who use have a higher incidence of anxiety, depression, suicide, and psychosis in their 20s. And so you're taking a developing brain and altering how that brain develops. And what we're seeing is the highest incidence of brain and mental health problems in young people we have ever seen. We're in this mental mess. Part of it are the societal lies that I've seen from the 80s. And then in the early 90s, alcohol is a health food. You should have a glass or two every night, and that's good for your heart. No, it's bad for your brain. The American Cancer Society came out 4 years ago against any alcohol because any alcohol is associated with an increased risk of 8 different cancers. But the idea in society is alcohol is a health food. It's a lie. Huge societal lies. Your brain is involved in everything you do. How you think, how you feel, how you act, how you get along with other people. And when this works right, you work right. And when it doesn't, you don't.
You can tell from a brain scan of a 16-year-old whether that child's using drugs.
I can tell whether or not it's toxic. That's all evident in the scan. It's toxic. Now it's my job then to figure out why. And so when I see the toxic scan in this ADD 16-year-old who did not have ADD or ADHD when he was 7, right? It's not something you just pick up. If you really have ADHD, you had it your whole life. If it just shows up, you either had a head injury, you're doing drugs, or you're living in a mold-filled home. There's a reason why. The scans are so helpful for me, a little bit like a lie detector, because it's really hard to say, oh, no, I'm not using, when your brain looks toxic and there's not another good reason that it looks toxic.
So have you noticed, since you do treat children as well, an increase in damaged brains that you can attribute to marijuana use?
Absolutely. We should be completely freaked out. And people are like, marijuana is innocuous, marijuana is innocuous. And it's like, why are you saying that?
Because they're getting rich from it, probably.
Well, the marijuana industry, which hates me, spends $3 billion a year on marketing. It's a weapon of mass destruction.
Marijuana.
Like, how do you not talk about the truth? And it's like, well, how do you know? It's like, well, I look at the brain. And if your brain is not right, well, you're not right.
Yeah.
So SPEC, the study we do, gives you this really beautiful 3D look at activity. And a healthy scan shows full, even, symmetrical activity, with most of the activity being in the cerebellum. So the cerebellum is the back bottom part of the brain. Cerebellum is Latin for little brain. And it's 10% of the brain's volume, but has 50% of the brain's neurons. And alcohol is directly toxic to the cerebellum. Well, so is marijuana. It used to be thought that the cerebellum was involved in coordination, physical coordination. Well, now we know it's also involved in thought coordination, how quickly you can integrate new information. And marijuana slows the function of the cerebellum, so your thoughts become slower and you're less coordinated, which is why you shouldn't drive if you're high. It certainly alters your brain. It works on CB1 receptors. So there are cannabis receptors in your brain, endocannabinoid receptors, and it activates dopamine, which means you feel high.
Yep.
It feel rewarded, want to do it again.
For sure.
And in vulnerable people, it actually disrupts dopamine. So it doesn't work consistently, effectively. And if it disrupts it, if it goes too high, then for vulnerable people, you can become psychotic. You can begin to lose touch with what's real and what's not real. So if you think of psychosis, that's the definition of psychosis, is you begin to have trouble differentiating what's real and what's not. You might have delusions, hallucinations, and it triggers psychosis that in some people will turn into schizophrenia, which is arguably the worst psychiatric illness.
Arguably the worst illness there is, period. I can't think of anything worse than that.
No, it's awful. And so why would you use something if you didn't know your genetic risk that could flip you into not knowing what's real or not? You don't want a smaller brain because it controls everything you do. Well, why would you hurt it unless you were not that smart?
What does marijuana do to testosterone levels?
Lowers it.
Conclusively, you can say that.
Yes.
Is marijuana a medicine?
Well, I think when used properly, it can be helpful. You have to get your brain healthy. And so if you're using marijuana for the chronic pain, it's suppressing those pain centers, but it's not getting your brain healthy. And so when you stop the marijuana, the pain is just going to come back. And it's very important. In the book, I talk about the doom loop, where you have pain for any reason, which then triggers the suffering circuits in the brain that actually are the same ones for anxiety and depression. Anxiety, depression, pain, the same circuits in the brain. which then triggers this flood of ants, automatic negative thoughts. I need surgery. I'll never be well. I'll always be in pain, which then triggers muscle tension, which increases the pain and leads to bad habits. So not just marijuana, but could be overeating because of the marijuana. And you end up into this cycle of the doom loop.
But so marijuana is, in your opinion, as a physician, helpful for a few just specific illnesses, glaucoma and low appetite. Why wouldn't the answer be to isolate whatever the compound is in marijuana that helps with appetite and glaucoma and literally medicalize it, put it in a pill or some pharmaceutical form, and then, sell it like you would any other pharmaceutical?
Well, they've done that for a long time.
Oh, okay. I'm not the first one to think of that. Okay, so we have that.
And so why does it need to be legalized for everything? And are we better off than we were before we did that? And the answer is absolutely, we're not better off. We're in the worst mess that we've ever been, and we need to be honest with ourselves.
Booker's
and I'm just a fan of the truth.
Of course.
And my interest is to help you have a better brain, because if you have a better brain, your marriage is better. You're a better dad. You make more money.
And what is the effect of chronic marijuana use on marriages?
Well, I just released a podcast with Julius Randle, NBA superstar. I love him. It's public knowledge now that I've been his doctor. It was ruining his marriage because his wife said he wasn't present.
Right.
They
already say that about men. So you don't need encouragement to be more vacant or distant.
It had just changed his soul in the sense that he just didn't care about the things that were actually really important to him after he stopped. And he asked himself those questions. What do I really want? I want to be married. I love my wife. I want to be a good dad. I want to be a present dad. And yes, I want to be great at my craft. But there's so much more to me than just basketball. And when I met him, I learned that it was legal for NBA players. They just don't test them. So they can be...
The league allows NBA players to use marijuana.
Yes. So there's no restriction on it. And, I guess the only restriction is, well, how do you play? And Julius thought he played better when he used, but in fact, he played better when he didn't use. He just had to be able to learn how to manage his mind. When someone's using any substance, it's why.
Right.
And there are biological reasons why they use it, because it may decrease pain. There's psychological reasons. It does decrease the chatter in your head. There's social reasons, because you fit in with the group you're using.
I've had a couple very smart, just high IQ friends who use marijuana for that reason and say they become more fluent, clearer thinking, more able to focus. You're suggesting that could be real. They're not making that up.
No, it could be real, especially in the short run.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not in the long run. And I always want people to do things that help them feel good now and later versus now, but not later.
Yes.
And so are there other ways to optimize your brain? 50% of people 85 and older, 50% of people 85 and older will be diagnosed with dementia of one form or another. And it means if you're blessed to live to 85, you have a 1 in 2 chance of having lost your mind. And marijuana increases the risk of dementia.
Really?
Yeah. There's studies. We don't want dementia increasing in the population. Alzheimer's is expected to triple by 2050. And last year in the Lancet, their review article came out and said 50% of Alzheimer's disease is preventable. And I'm like, I'm so excited. It's like, yes, but in order to do that, you have to love your brain and take care of it. Low blood flow is the number one brain imaging predictor of Alzheimer's disease. So what lowers blood flow? Hypertension, being sedentary, alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, much caffeine, right? A little bit is fine, much not a good idea. The older you get, the more serious you need to be, and you need to know what promotes aging. Marijuana promotes aging. And now new studies out that if you're under 50 and you use marijuana, you have a 600% increased risk of having a heart attack. So we know it has a
600%?
600%.
That seems significant.
It seems significant. And so we know marijuana has a negative impact on blood vessels.
California is the largest marijuana growing state in the country, maybe the world. Certainly the highest potency, the best weed is grown in California, Mendocino, Humboldt counties, all that famously. I mean, it's a huge part of the state's economy. And you think that's why they won't say it's bad?
Yes. It's money and influence.
So like we used to make fun of the, congressman from Kentucky because he wouldn't say smoking caused cancer. How is this?
It's the same thing.
Like you'd take chemo if you had cancer, right? But you're
Absolutely would.
You wouldn't recommend your 8-year-old had chemo.
Would hurt my brain.
Right.
Right? But I have to have chemo or I'll die.
I get it.
And so I need to rehabilitate my brain. And it's probably from the almost 300,000 scans I've done, the biggest lesson is I'm not stuck with the brain I have, that I can make it better and I can prove it. Now I can also make it worse and I can prove that too, right? Every day I am making my brain better or I'm making it worse based on the choices that I make.
So compare the attitudes toward drugs in the United States, just broadly, vibe check, in other words, in 1982 compared to the attitudes you see now.
I think in 1982, we were much more concerned about the long-term negative impact of drug use, marijuana, psilocybin, than we are now. I think just this sort of general lie that, and we unleash these things without long-term neuroscience study. Because marijuana was banned, it got banned in 1937, they couldn't study it, sort of like psilocybin. And it is just, I see this as a psychiatrist and it just blows my mind how we unleash these things without actually taking the time to study them.
Do other psychiatrists feel that way?
Many of us do. I have 60 psychiatrists that work with me at Amen Clinics, and we all believe this. And
has the American Psychiatric Association taken a position on?
It's not a huge fan of marijuana as medicine. And most addiction societies are very concerned about it. So whatever you eat or whatever you drink or whatever you put on your body, another one of those questions. Do you love it? And does it love you back? Because if it doesn't love you back, don't do it.
What's a habit center?
So it's the dopamine loop in the brain. So there's an area called the nucleus accumbens, which is what responds to dopamine and gives you pleasure or pain. And And it's connected to the basal ganglia. It's part of the basal ganglia. If that takes over your life, you're just going to give in to whatever those habits created that. And it
are you describing craving there?
Well, there's a difference between wanting something and liking something. An addiction often goes to you want it, but you don't necessarily like it anymore.
Yes.
And there's really this dance, often say, between the elephant and the writer. So the elephant is your emotional brain, and the writer is your prefrontal cortex that has to control or break your emotional brain. So the 4-year-old in you is not always in control. And when you hurt your frontal lobe, so think of hitting soccer balls with your forehead repeatedly, that'll hurt your frontal lobes, or playing tackle football. Now, all of a sudden, free will goes from perhaps 80% to 40%. And then when you get stoned, well, now it's at 10%, or you get drunk. It's this beautiful dance between your frontal lobes and your emotional brain that often become disconnected in addiction.
How hard is it to get off marijuana?
Easier than some things. Julius got off after he saw a scan. I see that a fair amount when people go, oh, this is not really helping me. It's damaging me.
So he gets off, or anyone gets off who's a daily user. There are millions of daily users. But what happens next?
Well, it takes a while. It takes a couple of months, I think, for that to fully get out of their system. And it depends on, do they get off and substitute brain healthy behaviors that help rehabilitate their brain? And that combination makes it easier to get off. If they get off and then replace it with vaping or replace it with sugar, they're much more likely to relapse. And when you go to AA meetings, I always found this very interesting. They'd have the donuts and everybody's smoking and they're eating donuts and coffee with a lot of sugar. And I'm like, maybe we could replace those things with healthier things, healthier choices.
People who get off, particularly alcohol, tend to go bonkers with sugar. What is that?
Well, they're just trying to replace feeling good, because sugar works on the dopamine centers of your brain as well. With a healthy brain, you're less likely to relapse. There's a verse in the New Testament I like, Romans 12:2. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And most Christians know that, but they don't know the second part of it. Then you can test to see if it fits God's good, perfect, and pleasing will. And murdering Tana does not fit God's good, perfect, or pleasing will, and in fact will not make me happy because I love her so much more than I love the dog.
Of course.
Right? But just having a thought, it's just like the weather. It's like, oh, it's a storm. And I can take that thought captive and I don't have to believe it. But there's nowhere in school where we teach kids to manage their minds. And so if they get these crazy thoughts, they think they're bad. And they don't know how to deal with it, so they smoke pot to manage it. And then that becomes the habit loop of their life. So Dostoevsky said, you can tell about the soul of a society, not by how it treats its outstanding citizens, but by how it treats its criminals.
Yes.
And it just, I want to rehabilitate people who do bad things, or at least try, right? We should look at their brains and see, can we get them better? Can we get them to love their brains so they don't go out and use drugs? And I was involved in a program in Washington State where they actually screened for ADHD and learning disabilities, made them go through a 14-week course to learn about what they had. And it cut recidivism from 69% to 29%. Now, I think this is a conservative idea.
Yeah, it is.
That if you invest in true rehabilitation, they're going to get out and they're less likely to come back, which means they're going to get out, they're going to work, they're going to take care of their families, they're going to pay taxes. They're going to be a more important part of society rather than we just house them and punish them further.
Your new book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Pain. Dr. Amen, thank you. That was amazing.